Hi, everybody. This is Patti Negri. Welcome to the Witching Hour. Yes, the Witching Hour, that hour of the day when the veil is thin and magic happens. Usually it's late at night, but now it's whenever you happen to be tuning into this podcast. And the magic here is in my guests. I have a really, really special one for you today. I just got to know him a week or two ago in Arizona. I actually have Demonologist, Deacon, paranormal investigator, and all around amazing guy, James Annitto. Thank you so much for coming on, James.
Thank you, Patti, for having me. And it definitely was a pleasure meeting you this past weekend, or was it 2 weekends ago? However it is, it felt like a lifetime of like having to not met each other and talk to each other. It was just an amazing weekend. It was in Arizona, the beautiful desert, beautiful cactuses, your company. And
And I didn't kill you down a mining shaft.
yeah,
I tried.
we almost went down a mining shaft, but
We did.
I'm glad everything is all right. We're all right, and still we could have that as a memory for the rest of our lives.
For the rest of our lives, yes. I'm so glad I did not have to call home and say I lost the car down a mining shaft, and people were screaming in the back seat. James got out. It was really good, but he was directed me because the car was sliding in the sand and going straight towards some big old rusty piece of equipment. Missed it by that much. So it was an exciting ghosty weekend in Vulture City, but it was really great, and we got to investigate together. So again, you are different than a lot of my guests because you really are of the ministry. You are an exorcist, right? You're a demonologist. So tell us a little bit about you for my folks who I can't imagine don't know who you are and how you got there.
Yeah, so to clarify, Patti, I am not an exorcist. I am a deacon of the United States Old Catholic Church, and before formally, I was an ordained minister with the Church of Christ as a deliverance minister. So, what I would say more so than what I would prefer to be called is a deliverance minister or somebody that performs deliverances. An exorcist requires years of training that I have not formulated yet in my life, and maybe one day I will reach those lengths and get to that point. But one step at a time, as they say. So, who I am, my name is James Annitto, as you said, and I am a demonologist, a deacon, a paranormal investigator and researcher with PPRI, which is a parapsychology group out of New England and Canada, ran by two doctors of social science, and basically have been kind of succumbed to this field at an early age, not due to a haunting or any unnatural things, no demons, no ghosts, no spirits, but more so of childhood trauma. And because of that childhood trauma, I really had a disdain for God. You could call me agnostic, atheist, but I really would like to call myself at a youth, and still to this day in some form, a Darwinist. I loved evolution. I loved biology. Still love science to this day. And incorporated into that, I'm also a psychology major as well. So, that love of science has developed into my late early adulthood, and as well as in the paranormal, because being through my childhood trauma, I was always thrown into the fire of God is good, this faith, that faith, how it's so great, and how these beings and deities are either benevolent or malevolent. But I really had questions. My questions were, if these things exist, why does this happen to certain people? Why, if God is good in my Christian belief system, why would I be at 4 years old left on the side of the street by my father and left there, and then adopted? So these questions raced through my head. And of course, the people that adopted me were a Lutheran family. They'd go to church every Sunday. I'm hearing all these psalms and these hymns and how great God is, and I'm like, what is God? What is this being people call, saying that it is so omnipotent, omnipresent, great? And one of the things that in my search of theology, I really started dabbling into the paranormal in the sense of watching these shows. And, everybody laughs, but I love Scooby-Doo. And Scooby-Doo is a great entryway for children to understand the aspects of the paranormal and how people can be deceived. So, with Scooby-Doo and of course Tales of the Crypt, In Search of by Leonard Nimoy, and the list goes on. Unsolved Mysteries, which was an amazing show back in the early 90s and 80s, kind of thrusted me into, all right, well, people are explaining these things now. How does this relate to God? So I started picking up a lot of books, Hans Holzer, Harry Price, Houdini, Charles Dickens, Charles Babbage, Arthur Conan Doyle, people all that have been associated with the paranormal at some point in time. And it just led me down a rabbit hole that led me down to at this point in here where I am with you on this amazing show. So it's been a long, illustrious history. But as far as like the ministry route, yeah, I do the ministry things, because now I have found faith. You might call it something different, or the other person might call it something different, but I do believe a higher power exists. And this is not to sell the Bible, or this is not to sell what I believe in, because I think everybody is allowed to believe in what they wish to believe in, as long as it is for the good. But I found something, and that is because sometimes when you seek questions, answers do come. And I eventually received my answers. And it's not to the full degree where I would say they're empirical or factual, but I know what happened with me and my experiences. And that's the domino effect that I needed in my life that has me here today.
That is beautiful. So that's why I like you so much. Again, you see the big picture. We see that it really is kind of a roadmap. We create our belief system. We create from our truths, and it's so we can navigate our life. So again, I see where you're going, and I see with Scooby-Doo and all the shows, because I had, my generations of those same kind of shows. I wasn't sitting watching, family dramas. I wasn't. I was watching this weird, spooky stuff. But still getting into like paranormal, like investigations, and then specializing in the demons, that still is a little bit of a left turn.
Well, yeah, no, most definitely. I was in the Mystery Machine when I turned left, and really what enamored me about demons or angels or spirits in general was more the theodicy nature of good versus evil, or karma. And Epicurus, which is of Greek, as a Greek philosopher, I loved Epicurus because when he talked about good and versus evil, I wanted to know what good and evil entailed. And I really feel like something like hamartology, which is the study of sin, and this is, of course, more Christian theology basis, that I really wanted to know what evil was or what good was. So as far as the demonology, how that kind of became engulfed in my life was more so, I started reading early adaptions of like the Demonologist and Father Malachi Martin and Father Gabriel Morth, and people that necessarily are kind of closed-minded in the sense of their belief systems, but that are very intelligent individuals when it comes to their theology and some form of people as well. So the demonology thing really kind of exploded when I got out of the military. I was in the Army, and basically that's where I found my faith. And I was medically discharged. I hit a very dark period in my life due to that, because I felt like a failure. It was something that was like an eternal goal. I wanted to do this for 20 years, retire, and say I served my country. And so that failing that I felt inside, if I didn't have that faith, I probably would have committed suicide. I had an early attempt in my life due to the childhood trauma. And I feel like that faith is what kind of lifted me up into the light and got me out of that tunnel of darkness. So I started at a local church, being a pastoral assistant for the Church of Christ. And while being a pastoral assistant, I started investigating heavily again, because I started out when I was 14 years old, on the cusp of 15. So I was always kind of interested in dabbling and looking at the mysteries and lores and the folklores of the surroundings. I know you're into the vampire legends and vampire situation, and we have Mercy Brown, which is more than 20 minutes from where I am currently right now. So I started dabbling into a lot of these locations, investigating local surroundings that maybe I shouldn't have gone into. So while doing the ministry work and investigating, I eventually founded my own group called Ghost Hunters of Supernatural Truth, with an individual named Andre Courier, who was on an episode of The Haunting, which was on Animal Planet, called Demon Attack. And he had worked with an individual called Carl Johnson. And people might know Carl Johnson as the twin brother to Keith Johnson, both appearing on the first 2 seasons of Ghost Hunters, and then Keith on Paranormal State, and Carl and another plethora of shows afterwards. And then, of course, as well, both brothers were on Ghost Adventures, which you're an alumni of. And so basically, I eventually met Carl, and Carl actually took me under his wing as his tech manager, because I, as well, not just don't have a theology background, ministry background, and a psychology background, but I have a computer programming background. It's what I went to a vocational school for and went to college for before I went in the military. So basically, he brought me on as his tech manager, and I just started working with Carl on a lot of residential cases, more than I did so with Ghost. And basically, that's kind of what catapulted me into demonology, because I really started to see that not everything is demons. I actually didn't even believe in demons until probably my early 20s, when I came across a very nasty spirit that was puffing its chest out, because I don't know why it was disincarnate in the sense of being evil, but it really was doing harmful things to that family. And that was really what solidified that deities or demons, or what other people might interpret as an evil spirit, that they exist. So the demonology things kind of unraveled by Carl Johnson, but I was always fascinated in it. Good and evil, I think, to anybody, beside as well of the question what comes after death, is very intriguing to us, because we have good humans, we have evil humans, and why does that happen to people? I think that is a question that many of us ask every day when we deal with people or deal with this stuff in the paranormal. So yeah, I could take this whole show to tell you how demonology and why I believe brought me to there, but I definitely believe it's a calling. And I could definitely cement that and say I believe it's a calling. I believe it's because of my trauma. I believe I was sculpted into being the individual I am for a reason. Doesn't make me any special than anybody else, but it's the role that I believe I am meant to do in my life.
And that's beautiful. And mine is a calling too. It's like I've tried to do a million other things, and I keep coming back to this odd, even less definable path than yours. But I do like that you said everything's not a demon. I mean, I certainly believe in demons. I certainly believe in angels, but I do think demons get way more credit than they should. I think, but again, you are the expert there. You are the demonologist. But don't you think that a lot of times it's just some cranky ghost, or that they think it's a demon? How do you tell the difference as a professional?
Oh, Patti, you are 100% spot on. Most times it's somebody cranky. I always say, if I'm a negative person in life and we believe in disembodied spirits, if our soul, our consciousness, however we want to interpret it, leaves our body, or our subconsciousness is no longer connected to our physical body, and it floats around or whatever it does, I think is the biggest question to most of us as investigators. You probably have a better idea, because as a psychic medium, you see it. You probably have a little bit of a connection, that kind of hook, line, and sinker that kind of gives you that ability to understand it, but I don't. So in the same sense, I if I'm negative and I die and I still linger for some sort of reason, maybe because I'm just not happy enough to move on, or I'm not allowed to move on. I'm going to be negative in that presence as well, because guess what? That's how I was all my life.
Yeah.
If you meet a serial killer that is a spirit, I'm pretty sure they're going to have the same characteristics, or not characteristics, but the same personality that they had in life if they still linger. People that are lost souls that maybe were killed, and the Lucky Bones, or the Lovely Bones with Mark Wahlberg, is one of my favorite movies. Kind of talking about a lost soul, how the daughter is killed by this killer, and she lingers around because she wants to express to her dad and express to her family how she was killed. So she tethers to the world. And I think sometimes when lost souls become lost, they become negative because they're confused. That outward emotion of what happened, that tantrum they throw, and they also give off a kind of a negative presence as well, because sometimes when people are confused, they become mad or anxious, and these are not really great emotions in the physical sense. But in the brunt of it, I would say, and I like to give a statistic on demons to spirits, or even psychokinetic or thought form of tulpa or egregore. I've come across 5 cases that I would qualify as demonic in the past 16 years. And like you said, I tend to believe that a lot of it stems from the human kind of psychological issue or mental health. And that doesn't denote that the paranormal doesn't exist, but like in my cases of demonic infestation, oppression, or possession, trauma is always prevalent. And as well, even in a haunting, when there is a haunting going on in a house, there seems to be some sort of element of the human nature as well involved, why that activity spurted. And so if I'm approaching on somebody's place, let's say they lived there for 30 years, they died in that location, or died in another location, but were still tethered there because they loved that place so much, and somebody else moves in, I think there's going to be a negative reaction sometimes, because this is my home. What are you doing here? And another example of this, and I love to use pop culture as a reference because I think people love movie entertainment. The first season of American Horror Story, perfect example, right? They moved in, there was some negative spirits there, some good spirits, and there was like a smorgasbord of activity that would occur there. And I think this is what happens. I think that's why people deal with negative spirits. And why, as humans, if we dealt with something negative, why would we jump to it's a demonic? Well, for one, Christianity in itself is 2.2 billion followers. It is the largest of religions and faiths out there. And I think when people read the Bible or are told things by certain churches, they kind of get the wrong notion of this is what they're coming in front of, because they've been kind of brainwashed or haven't done their own research. And also, it's another psychological study to bring psychology into it. Something in my psychology research and through my academic college is that, we always tend to jump to the worst case scenario, the fight or flight reaction that we have. So I use as reference as a bush. I'm looking at a bush right now outside my window that I can't see what's in that bush, but it ruffles, it moves. Am I going to think there's an animal in that bush ready to attack me, or is it the wind? Most people will jump to the conclusion that there's an animal in that bush and there's something in there that's going to attack me, or something that's not good in that bush, because guess what? We jump to the worst case scenario. We see that on a daily basis as humans. So that's why people jump to demons more than just, oh, it's the spirit or it's myself. And I don't know if you saw this, Patty, but when we went through COVID for the past 2 years, I know it was very quiet in the sense of what we could do, but I did have a lot of people call me saying, hey, I'm experiencing this now that I'm home. But they also forget to think that cabin fever is quite a possibility. They're going through high emotions. The whole collective consciousness is going through a high emotion, and we're taking more in. And I think that's also a piece of the puzzle as well.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, with COVID, all of a sudden we were sitting home when we're used to going here and there and here, and you don't even pay attention what you think or isn't happening. You're just going on. Now we had to be still, which was good in a lot of aspects, and some people just didn't do it really well. Yeah, and I do think mental, in my experience, when things or people that let the dark stuff affect them themselves, it's so often there is the trauma, like you're saying, or mental imbalance or addiction problems.
Yeah.
That just seems to like let a bunch of things in. But again, sadly I missed it. Just you are a demonologist. You do certain things. We were just in Vulture City, a beautiful little mining town, and you actually did a minor rite of exorcism, correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, I had to. Technically, I'm supposed to get permission in some certain cases.
Nobody will know.
Yeah, of course. Now the whole world will know. But really, what had happened is, not to give a little bit of the story, is I had an fellow demonologist there. His name is Leon Wilkes. He's part of the Anglican Church, and he is from the lineage of the Warrens as well, like myself, because I trained under the Johnsons and trained under other people that come from that Warren lineage. But he came from David Considine, which he has the right to say that he's the only person David Considine ever taught. And that's a great honor, because Considine is a very well-knowledge individual in this field of demonology. But he was there, and we had done an investigation. I believe it was Saturday night, right, Patty?
Yeah.
And we were stuck in the church, of course, put two religious men in the church. Great idea. I'm not being sarcastic. It was a great idea.
Yeah.
So what happened is we were speaking liturgy and saying prayers and trying to invoke certain things in a positive nature. We were asking questions because some of the things that had been said there is people had asked questions about spirits, and the religious beings there, whoever they were in life, now deceased, would say, stop speaking to the devil, or stop doing this, stop trying to raise the dead. And this is what was told to me by Jay Yates and other people that have investigated the church before. So I wanted to kind of keep it neutral. I didn't want to aggravate them. But if I did aggravate them, I wanted to also invoke some sort of nature that they would as well connect to, because I don't want to provoke. I'm not trying to put people at harm. So what had happened in the first few sessions, because it was group rotations after I think 30 or 45 minutes, and first few sessions were benevolent in communication. Yes, we were getting things. We had some spirit box, EVP, EMF hits, and it seemed at peace what we were speaking to. And then unfortunately, we had this one individual, I think the third or fourth session in, who's a little bit under the influence of alcohol. And I won't say their name. I don't want to judge them or throw them under the bus, but unfortunately they have some dark things in their life. They were not totally coherently there, and I think they were latched onto by something, or latched onto something by her life that has followed her whole life. And she came into play, and she did what I would say the demoniac was, somebody that's possessed by a demon. And I'm not saying it was a demon. I'm gonna use whatever I'm talking about loosely. But she was giving that eye penetration kind of stare, where she wasn't looking at you, she was looking right through you. And I even said it in front of a bunch of people. I'm like, what are you looking at? Like, because I could feel it. I could feel like the goosebumps. I could feel like the equilibrium change, like there was a barometric pressure change in that church. It felt uneasy. And the caveat of that moment is the communication started going from benevolent to a little bit more aggressive. And in that moment, one of the individuals there, who's a psychic medium, I love her to death. She's a great person. She has her own podcast, and I won't say her name because this is personal, but she was abused and dealt with things when she was younger. And she asked the question, and it came out and said, I will always be here, precious. And precious wasn't a positive thing. It was a bad thing. Like the person that was negative to her called her precious, and the only person that called her precious. And it hit her. She started tearing and crying. And as soon as that happened, people started feeling sick. We started seeing shadow play. And as soon as the next group came in, somebody was spooked out of the church. It just went, the first few sessions after that just went downhill. And Leon and both myself felt it was needed, that we needed to shut that location down for a little bit of time. We did prayers over the location first. The prayers didn't seem to fully work. So then I had to do the next step, which was the minor rite of exorcism, which is an increased house blessing over a house or a location that might have demonic infestation. I don't want to use the word demonic with this because I don't really know what it was. I would definitely like to say the word inhuman, or maybe elemental, or even a thought form that was so perceived as negative because of this person's emotions and negativity and trauma. But it was very dark, and we had to perform a minor rite of exorcism. It worked, but during that, unfortunately, somebody actually had a channeling moment where she went into trance and was taken over. So while I was doing the minor rite of exorcism, Leon was saying prayers over her. Then 15 minutes, and I don't know if they care about me explaining this, but 15 minutes after all this happened and the person was kicked off the premise, one of the event holders, and I won't say names, I don't feel comfortable doing so, you know who I'm talking about, was actually attacked by this force. And then the next day, I had to perform a deliverance over her because she still was feeling this connection, this attachment. And then she was eventually rushed to the hospital because I feel like that medical staff should always be involved. And there was a nurse during the deliverance that was there with us. So we checked off as many boxes we could before we jumped to the supernatural. But this person's husband as well believed it was the supernatural. That was the main point of this. And they're very full-fledged investigators, very smart people.
Yes.
They've done this for a very long time.
Yes.
I didn't start doing the deliverance without permission. But yeah, this great weekend became kind of a little hectic for me, but that doesn't detract away that it was still a great weekend, even though there was a few hiccups in the moment.
Right. And again, that is, we are in this business. We're not sitting there knitting blankets. We are going into this other world by choice, all of us.
Yes.
But that brings up a really good thing. This is real. It's you see on TV and all the things that we do, and this is something that is very serious. And not everybody gets to travel with a demonologist. So what are some things, do you have any for like the average folks, they're getting into this world a little bit? Do you have any suggestions of what to do or not do, or who you're going to call when you need to, as a just any tips, ideas, thoughts?
Yeah, definitely, Patty. So I always tell people not to get into the field of demonology. It's not because of any egocentric belief that I should be the only person or whatever, but I always feel like people want to get into the wrong reason. They see myself or other demonologists that I do believe that have the credentials, have the background, worked with other demonologists, worked with many paranormal teams, worked with people like yourself that have that rapport and respect for each other. And I think people see us doing these grand lectures and having our ways to these certain conferences. And I think people feel like that is an easy entrance into these events, and it is the wrong way to think, and wrong attribute that you want to associate with, because demonology is a very well-versed study. I learn about psychology. I'm very eclectic. I'm not just a Christian demonologist. I study a lot about neo-paganism, Hinduism, Christianity, Muslim, Islamic folklore. African mythologies, mythologies in general, from Greek, Egyptian, and Norse mythologies, Shintoism, so on and so on. I'm very eclectic in what I study. I feel like a demonologist should, because demons are either in name or characteristical form, are in other belief systems. You have to understand the lores and the cultural traditions of wicked spirits. So people think because the title is cool, it's an easy step into. So I tell people, you shouldn't get involved in it unless you feel like it's a calling. And how do you know it's a calling? Well, if you were never religious and then you got into religion and then you felt like you could help people, then that might be the first step. But what happens with me, and I see this a lot, Patty, is people want to be mentored by me. And I do free mentorship because I don't do it for the money. I don't exploit people. I'm looking at my building right now, my office. I have a career. I'm a project manager and estimator for an HVAC company. Get paid very handsomely. One of the top in the company, in the hierarchy. I'm set as long as I do it, and I've been doing it for a long time. So to me is I do it on my time, and I always tell people, if you want to be mentored to me, you have to be willing to take your time and donate it, and understand that if I give you a book to read and say after the book or points in the part of the book, we have to talk. Sorry, this car is going by, but we have to talk and discuss these certain things, and then eventually you can come on to cases with me. Then, like, after a few books, people lose interest because it's not like what they thought it was. It's not going to be all these thrills and excitement, this roller coaster ride of this up and down loop and this, Superman drop that happens. Yes, those moments occur. Like, the last time I dealt with a demon was a few years ago. And it's not, and it's one thing I tell people, it's the trait, right? So for me, you think as a demonologist, I would want a demonic case to pop up because it gives me more experience being a demonologist, right? It gives me a little bit more a case study that I can observe. But hell no, I do not want to ever come across one of those cases because they're hectic. There's a lot of trauma. There's family dysfunction. It brings dysfunction in my life. I don't ever want to come across it because of those reasons. And if you are a person that wants to get into demonology to experience a demon, you're definitely not meant to do it, because that's not the reason we do it. No. We do it for the love of the study, but we do it for the love of helping an individual as well.
Right. So yes, I think we should talk everybody out of doing it if they can't help doing it because they have to do it, just like with any of these odd type professions. But I mean, if somebody wants to get into, okay, I want to become a little bit of a paranormal investigator, not a demonologist. Do you have any things for them, like what to watch out for, be careful of, stuff like that?
Well, yeah. So as you know, Patty, you take all the precautions in the world. I in your seance, you do a cleansing. You before your table tipping, you invoke great emotion so that there's nothing that can intercede that is negative. And I tell people, when you're in paranormal investigating, and I'm the oxymoron to this, because as much as I tell people it is dangerous and it could be playing with fire because you don't have the clear ability to see or feel certain things, and I think we all do, but some people are closed off to it, is that you're playing with fire, because it's like me talking to somebody and not knowing what I'm talking to. It's like being on a plane and talking to Mike Tyson and aggravating him and then get punched in the face. You at least know Mike Tyson's there and you're going to get punched in the face by Mike Tyson, but you don't know what's going to retaliate if you speak unknowingly or provocatively to this unseen force. So as I tell people to get in paranormal investigating, start slow. I always say, if you're going to ask questions, ask neutral questions, not personal questions that open yourself up to being involved with that communication. You could say, it's nice here. What's the age of this building? Like, start off slow until you feel comfortable, until you build a foundation of yourself. And I feel like as long as you have a faith or some sort of head on your shoulders to stay attuned to yourself, if something does kind of try to step onto your territory, you can at least try to do your best to push it away. But yeah, getting in paranormal investigating, I started off at 14. I started off with a disposable camera, a flashlight, and analog tape recorder. You can start off slowly, dabble, see if you like it. Go to local surroundings. Don't break into places. Ask permission. If you're going to a cemetery or graveyard, make sure that you're appropriate. You're not doing any vandalism. And you start off slow and then build your way. But I feel like it's such like when I got involved, I'm in Rhode Island. So even though it is a small state in the union, we only had like less than a dozen teams. Now we probably have 100 teams. So it's a little bit more accessible for people. So always reach out to somebody as well. And, it's hard because there's no like yellow book of paranormal investigators and their credentials or how well versed they are or what they're in it for. But you can still use Google, look for referrals, see what this team is about, talk to maybe former members or current members of multiple different opinions, how this group is, and get to know people and then ask to join a group. Because, when you're with like-minded individuals, you learn from different people and different points of views of doing things. You might have an ITC guy, you might have a videographer, you might have a psychic medium, you might have a demonologist, you might have a research guy, a historian. And you'll learn all different avenues of what paranormal investigating is about. And I think that's the best way of getting involved. I'm thankful this is the world that we live in. My son, 6 years old, Caleb, well, he's going to be 6. I've been taking him with me since he's been 4 years old. He's investigated Fort Mifflin, St. Albans. He's investigated Chambersburg Theaters, which in Pennsylvania, which is one of the oldest theaters in this country. He's been to the Conjuring House in Harrisville, Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. He's been to multiple different locations, and I started him off young, and he wants to. It's not like I forced him into it, but he's starting to become very intellectual on what questions to ask, and he's very well mannered in the way he approaches a surrounding. He does get rambunctious in normal life, but when he's investigating, it calms and cools and collects him, and he stays attentive. He stays concentrated of what he's doing, and I think it's fascinating to have mentors in this field as well.
That is fabulous. And I love that he's been to more places than I have. And I haven't been to the Conjuring House. That is awesome. Okay. Oh my God. I have so many questions, but I'm looking at time. But before we go, since it is Halloween time and it is the time when the veil is thin, and it's time we have lots of fun things too. And I have another podcast these days called The Witches Movie Coven. And we do talk about witchy movies and demonologist movies and good Halloween movies. Do you have any you recommend for anybody for this season, just for fun?
Most definitely. Of course, I think people are on a rift about Halloween Ends, but I preferred it. I loved it. So Halloween movies, you have the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, the old flicks. I love those. I'm a sucker for some Disney movies as well, so I love Halloween Town. Insidious, the Conjuring movies. Insidious is actually one of my favorite movies. Some exorcism movies like The Rite. I love The Rite with Anthony Hopkins, based on a true story. Exorcism of Emily Rose, based on a true story of Annalise McKell. So many great movies you can watch during the holiday season. I could give you 30 of them, so you could watch one every day in the 30 days or 31 of October. I'll give you 31 of them, but I would take too much of the show up. We'd be on another 10 minutes or so. Yeah, those are some of the great movies that I like to watch during the season. But like I said, Insidious is probably one of my top favorite James Wan movies and horror movies ever. Oh, and then of course, too, Patty, you might love this movie, but great movie, Midsommar.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So no, I have a question. When you were talking about these different movies, and when I watch a real witchy movie and I see how their ritual or what they're doing or spell crafting, I get like, oh, I don't do it like that. Not overly judgmental, but enough judgmental going, that's wrong. They didn't know what they were doing. Oh, that was good. Do you do the same thing when you see somebody doing demonology with?
Yeah, and actually one of my favorite shows of all time is, it's funny to say, I love Charmed, so I can imagine what you thought of know. But yeah, no, I definitely agree. Like a lot of people always relate to pop culture, and that's why I do as well. But yeah, sometimes I feel like, ooh, this is what they did. It kind of like gives a bad vibe to what this is what people expect. Like Exorcist is a prime example of a great movie back in 1973, right? It gave the spirit born, unfortunately, evil and connotation of being this is bad, and I don't necessarily agree on that. So maybe I should lose my demonology badge, but it also led to the pea soup, this head spinning, that levitation is common in this situation. And, in that movie and other movies, that's not the case. So, even though there are spurts of things that are real in the movies and do happen, there's of course a lot involved in the entertainment form of it as well that kind of adds a little bit of more of an element of spookiness and keeps your attention drawn, because if it was like any of my normal cases, to be honest with you, it'd probably be boring.
Right, no head spinning around and no pea soup.
No
Rarely the pea soup. I know, because it's movies, it's entertainment, it's fun. The good and the bad and the ugly is what we talk about on the Witches Movie Coven all the time. But before we go, again, you are so amazing. Tell anybody what you have coming up and where they can find you, and so follow you, any websites, your social media, because everybody's going to be intrigued now.
Yeah, definitely. So people want to get in touch with me, jamesannitto.com, JamesAnnitto.com, James Annitto on Facebook, at James Annitto on Instagram. I also have 2 events coming up this month. In the time being, I have Sleepy Hollow Paracon in Sleepy Hollow, New York. The 22nd of September, 22nd of October, and then October 29th, I have the big one. I'm a special guest and special moderator for the Warren Seekers of the Supernatural Paracon at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. And I will be the moderator for Keith and Carl Johnson's lecture. And I will also be the moderator for Mike Ricksecker's lecture. And, I have a lot more booked onto that. But follow me on my social medias. I post them on there. And if you are in trouble, please reach out to me at 401-808-7416. If you abuse my number, I'll abuse you. I'm just kidding.
I love that. You are the first person to give off a phone number. And you guys, he is amazing. Again, and now that I'm old friends with him and spent a whole weekend together, and I tried to kill him and I didn't. His heart is the size of a pumpkin. It's beautiful, and he knows what he's talking about, and he's great. So take down that number, follow him, go to social media, go to his website, and then have a great Halloween, everybody, or Samhain, or whatever you want to call it. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Patty. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Yay.